Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's Parsha Shiur, Parsha's Vayeira. If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. Two very interesting pieces from this week's Parsha. The Pasuk says at the beginning of the Sedra, Vayeira elov Hashem be'elonei mamre v'hu yoshev pesach ha'el k'chom hayom. The famous opening of this week's Sedra. Avram Avinu is recovering from bris milah. He's sitting by the opening of his tent, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears to him. And he sees three guests, three wayfarers heading towards him. Now, the question is, the Medrash asks, why does the Pasuk say, Vayeira elov Hashem be'elonei mamre? Who is Mamre? What's all that about? Says the Medrash. This is the Medrash on Chumash, the second box on the page. Yispar ve'lomo be'elonei mamre. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu dafka appear here? Says the Medrash, Yisparach shemesh l'HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'eino mekapech schar shel bria. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't hold back the schar of any person. Shloisha ahuvim hoyu l'Avram. Avram Avinu had three close friends, Oner, Eshkol, and Mamre. Those were their names. V'kiven she'omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'yimol, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu instructed Avram Avinu to do a bris milah, holach lokachas mehem eitzah. Avram Avinu went to his three close friends and he asked them an eitzah, what should I do? Should I do this mitzvah of bris milah? So, continues the Medrash. Holach etzel oner, omar kach v'kach omni HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu instructed me to do bris milah. What do you think? Omelei oner, I think it's crazy. Baal mum reitze atzel aseischa. You're going to damage yourself. You're going to make yourself vulnerable. You just came back from the war of the 4 kings against the 5 kings. You defeated the 4 kings. And their relatives are going to come. You're making yourself vulnerable, and therefore it's a very dangerous thing to do. So Avram Avinu then went to the second of his friends, to Eshkol. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me to do, to have a bris milah. Eshkol said to him, if you're an older person, if you have bris milah, that you'll lose a lot of blood, you'll be able to cope with it and you'll die. It's a very dangerous procedure. I don't recommend it. He went to his third friend, to Mamre. What do you think I should do? What's your advice? You want advice on this matter? The same HaKadosh Baruch Hu who saved you from the Kivshon Ha'esh, from the fiery furnace in Ur Kasdim, and he did all these miracles for you, and he saved you from the 4 kings when you went to do battle against them, and were it not for his help and intervention, they would have killed you. And they would have killed all of you, i.e. all 248 limbs. And you're asking about one of those limbs, what should I do? You should do what he instructed you to do. You, Mamre, who gave the eitzah to have the bris milah, I'm going to appear to Avram Avinu in your area. So that Medrash explaining the words of the opening of the Parsha. Now, it's quite a well-known Medrash. The difficulty is, many difficulties. And these questions I saw in the writings of Rabbi Leff in his lovely book, Outlooks and Insights. He asks the following questions. The first question is, and they're strong questions. Question number 1, if Avram Avinu was instructed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do bris milah, why did he need to seek the advice of his friends? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Lech Lecha, he goes. Why here is he seeking the advice of his friends? Number 2, if he did indeed need advice, then why did he go to his 3 friends? Why didn't he go to the yeshiva of Shem Vayeira? Shem was the son of Noach. He was one of the Gedolei Hadar, together with Ever. So go to them if you need some sort of guidance and you need to consult with someone. Why did he go to his friends and not to Shem Vayeira? Question number 3, 2 of the 3 friends highlighted the danger involved. Why then listen to the third, Mamre? Don't you go after the majority? Why listen to Mamre and not to those 2? And fourthly, why was Mamre rewarded exactly? He gave him some advice. What exactly is that about? So, Says Rabbi Leff, a very beautiful mahalach. Having friends and seeking friendship and getting their advice is a very big value in Judaism. It's a very important thing. Here's the first source. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is instructing us about this. Why? It says Nase Odom. Look at this. Rashi says Nase Odom. Even though the Malachim were not helping HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it were, with the creation of man, and there is an opportunity for non-believers to say, you see, there's more than one God. Na'aseh Odom, in the plural, we will make man. Lo limna hakosov min elamed derech eretz. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I don't care about that. I want to teach the world the importance of derech eretz, or midas hanova, and a humble way. That it's appropriate for a bigger person to take guidance and advice from someone who is junior to him. And if I would have written the reality, I, Hashem, will make man, we wouldn't know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it were, has consulted with his Beis Din, and not just with himself, rather than just with himself. And the response to the minim is, don't worry, it was obviously just HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it says, Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam, in the singular, not Vayivra'u. Fine. But what you see from here is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us that everyone needs to consult. Everyone needs to take advice. Kaviyachal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need to take advice. But he's teaching us, I'm willing to write Nase Odom, even though it's a sort of a somewhat dangerous thing to write, people might misunderstand it, because I'm teaching you that even a gadol should go to a cotton to seek advice. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, in the first parak, in Mishnah Vov, Yoshua min prachi omer, asei lecho rav, uknei lecho chover, v'avidon es kol ha'odom lekaf schus. Famous Mishnah. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, v'knei lecho chover. Why do you need a friend? What is the purpose of friendship? So the Rabbeinu Yonah there on the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says three things. Knei lecho chover, l'shleish dvarim tzorech odom ele chover hatov. A person needs a good friend for three reasons. Ha'echad, l'divrei Torah. To learn and to engage in the Divrei Torah, like it says, Harbe Molamad Ziraboisai, Umichaveira Yosimi Raboisai. From your colleagues, from your chavrusas, you actually learn more than from your teachers. Number one. V'hasheni lemitzvahs, they encourage each other in mitzvahs. V'hashlishi le'inin ha'etza, that they can take advice. You can seek counsel. You can speak to somebody. She'yichenu liyos le'meir. A mayor la'azor, he can offer insight and help you b'chol inyanov, in all your matters. V'lo mimenu eitz tova, you can take advice from a person. V'lios ben soidei achayos ima b'bris v'lo yigalu lacherim, and you can keep secrets. You can confide in somebody. You can discuss something. That's, says Rabbi Yonah, is really one of the important values of friendship. The pasuk says in Mishlei, machshavas be'etz tikoin, plans with advice, tikkoin will be established. The Meiri says on that pasuk in Mishlei, Yodua, fascinating. Shekol Odom tzorech eitzah. Every single person needs to take advice from someone. He needs to have someone to speak to. Va'afilu hamaskil shemaskilim, even the wisest of person, ki ha'odom karvel etzlatzmoi, because we are all subjective. We are all nogea. We all have personal interests. We don't see things clearly. And therefore you consult with a third party, with a friend who's not submerged in the same subjectivity that you are, and he'll give you good advice. Now that concept of being objective, the challenge of being drawn to your own subjectivity is well established. If you turn over the page, there's an amazing Gemara in Gittin. The Gemara says in Gittin, Bante de Rav Nachman ishtaboyen. One time, the daughters of Rav Nachman were held captive. V'ishtaboy iu nami badayu, and one of the Amoraim, Rav Ilish, was captured with them. Yom echad, hav Yosef gabeyahu gavra, tav yoda belishna disiperi. They were sadly held in captivity. Rav Nachman's daughters, Rav Ilish, and this person, tav yoda belishna disiperi, who knew the language of birds. This third person. Also, urva v'kakorile. Suddenly, a raven appeared, outside of the dungeon or wherever they were staying. They were being held. Omalei Maika Omar. So Rav Ilish said to this third party, this third person, what are the birds saying? Omalei, Ilish barach, run away, Ilish, flee. Omar, so Rav Ilish said to himself, Urva shikrahu, and Urva is telling a lie, it's a treifa bird, V'lo samichna alei, and I'm not relying on that. Adahachi also yoina, v'kokaria. And again, suddenly another bird came, a yoina, a dove, and he started chirping. Omalei Maika Omar, so Rav Ilish said to this guy, what is the bird saying? Omalei, Ilish brach, Ilish flee. Omar, Knesset Yisrael kayoina mitalia. Klal Yisrael are compared to the dove. Shema mino misrachash li nisa. Clearly a nace is going to happen. And the kachava kom orak. He got up and he fled. Misrachash li nisa of a mavra, and he fled. So, what was the story? Rav Nachman's daughters, Rav Ilish, and this other person were held in a cave somewhere. They heard the noise of a raven. This other guy knew the language of birds. Rav Ilish said to him, what did it say? It said, Ilish brach. He didn't listen because the arvo the raven is a treifa bird. A yoina then came along and chirped. What did it say? Brach Ilish. He said, what did it say? Brach. Okay, I'm out of here. I'm going. Because Klal Yisrael compared to a Knesset, to a yoina, and therefore he went. On that Gemara in Gittin, there's a Gilyon Hashas. There's Rabbi Vayeira has a gloss on the side of the Gemara, and he quotes the Aruch, and he says, the Aruch brings from this sugya that Rav Ilish yoda sichas ha'ifos, that Rav Ilish knew the language of birds. How can he say that? Because this Gemara suggests the exact opposite. He didn't know the language of birds. He had to ask this third person, what did the bird say? So how can the Aruch bring from this Gemara? You see from here that Ilish yoda sichas ha'ifos. That's it, and Rabbi Vayeira just makes that observation, and that's the end of that. I haven't seen this inside, but from memory, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz makes an amazing insight. He says, you see from this Gemara, what the Aruch means is this. You see from this Gemara that Rav Ilish did know the language of birds. So if that's the case, why did he ask this fellow to interpret it? The answer is, because Rav Ilish knew that he wanted to hear Ilish brach. He wanted to hear the birds say, it's time to get out of here, escape and you'll be successful. But he didn't trust his own subjectivity. He was nogeya b'dava. He had personal vested interest to hear that. So therefore he asked the other person, I think I just heard, I knew what I just heard. I understand the language of birds, he thought to himself. Tell me, you understand the language of birds, what did you hear? He wanted to be sure that he heard it correctly because he didn't trust his own subjectivity. So you see from here the importance of the challenge of being objective. There's a famous story in Tanakh with David HaMelech and Nosson HaNavi. After the incident of Bathsheba, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to tell off David HaMelech, Lefi Madrigos, exactly what the Vayeira was, not for now. But either way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to tell off David HaMelech for the chait of Bathsheba. Yeah, Kol She'omer David Chota in Elatoya, but whatever the chait was. How did he do it? He sent his Novi, Nosson, to go and tell David off. So Nosson HaNovi comes along and he gives him the famous mashal. He says there was a very wealthy farmer who owned lots of land and had lots of livestock. And next to him there was a very poor farmer who had one sheep. The wealthy farmer came and he took that sheep. Mad dinoi, what's the halacha? So says David HaMelech, he's chayev. Says Nosson HaNovi, Ato ha'ish, it's you. It was a mashal because Bathsheba was married. Okay, let's not get into the details with Uriah, and David HaMelech took Bathsheba as a wife. So Ato ha'ish, says David HaMelech, Chotasi. Why did Nosson HaNovi just say to him, David HaMelech, why did you marry Bathsheba? She was married or whatever the case was, but she was married to another man, and therefore you can't take this woman. What was going on? But why did you have to give it by derech mashal? The teretz is because a person, even someone as great as David HaMelech, would see things more objectively if he's told a mashal, which is very clear to him, and then he's told Ato ha'ish, it's you. Oh, chayev, chotasi. I'm sorry. So you see that even someone as great as David HaMelech will see things more clearly if it has that objective angle. That's why he gave him the musar in that way. There's an amazing Rashba in Tshuvas. This is all from Rabbi Lev, or most of it. Rabbi Lev says that he quotes a Tshuva of the Rashba in Chelik Aleph Siman Memches. This is the next box on the second page. She'ela. This was the question that came to the Rashba. It says in the first chapter of Brachas, Miyad yoyatzin b'Achitophel, Achitophel ze yoyatz shenema va'atzas Achitophel asher yoyatz. We know that Achitophel was an advisor because the pasuk says va'atzas Achitophel asher yoyatz. Says the questioner to the Rashba, Tema, amai itzrich la'asuy yikrot Achitophel ze yoyatz. Why do we need to bring a pasuk that Achitophel was a yoyatz, was an advisor, to hatuva chazinon Achitophel yoyatz? So we know very well there are lots of cases of Achitophel giving advice to David HaMelech. Why do we need to marshal a pasuk to prove it? That was his question to the Rashba. Says the Rashba in response, Tshuva, Ma zu sheila. What sort of question is this? Chad min kroi nokat. Because that's how the Torah works. We often want to marshal psukim to prove points. Fine. Va'oid mistaber dedavka nakte hacha lefi shehu dava matmiyah. Because there's a perplexing point over here. There's something very strange. Once you've consulted with the Urim V'Tumim, Mala Atzas B'nei Odom, Eisek Sham. Why are you asking a human being? You've already consulted with the Urim V'Tumim. Why go ask Achitophel? You've got HaKadosh Baruch Hu's response through the Urim V'Tumim. Why are you seeking advice from Achitophel? Do you know what the Rush was saying? The Rush was saying that you're right. They've reached their decision. The Urim V'Tumim has given the answer. But you want to be sure that you've interpreted it properly. You haven't been swayed by your own subjectivity, your own negias. You should still seek advice. So even if you're absolutely clear what the advice and which way to go, it's still important to seek advice. So you see from all of the above the importance of friendship, the importance of advice, the challenges of subjectivity, and the importance of impartial advice. With all of that, says Rabbi Lev, Avraham Avinu was never in doubt. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, do the bris milah. He was going to do the bris milah. But he wanted to seek impartial advice from his close friends, from the Baalei Bris, because he was worried that maybe he hasn't understood the Tziva of HaKadosh Baruch Hu properly. Maybe he has his own negias. He needs to consult with his very close friends, with his Baalei Bris, with the confederates who forged a bond together, and they could give impartial advice. Now, the problem was that on there in Eshkol, they didn't give bad advice. They thought that actually it's dangerous, either because you're making yourself vulnerable and the relatives of the four kings could come and attack you. The Medrash doesn't say it was bad advice. And Eshkol, when he gave advice, you're an older person, you're going to damage yourself, this is dangerous. It wasn't bad advice, but they said, this is what I would do if I was, this is what I would do if it was me. But that means you're not freeing yourself from your own subjectivity. They were looking at it from their own perspective. But they said what they would do if they received a similar command. But Mamre, he was the only one who put himself into Avram's place, and therefore he advised accordingly. If I put myself into the other person's position, I'm freeing myself of my own negias. I'm thinking, it's not me, it's you. Mamre freed himself of his own negias. Right, if it was Avram Avinu, what would I do? So that's very good. That's advice from a friend who is no longer swayed by any subjectivity, because Mamre puts himself in Avram's shoes. Oh, that counts as something. But Oner and Eshkol, they gave advice from their own perspective, and therefore it wasn't bad advice, but it was just swayed by their own personal subjectivity. That's the problem. And therefore, the Avram Avinu was able to accept that advice. So why did he need to seek the advice? Because he was concerned. What were our questions? Why did Avram feel the need to seek advice? Because he didn't feel confident that he had understood the tzivui, the command, the direction of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe I'm swayed by my own subjective feelings towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I need to be sure about this. I'll go to my three friends and they can give me impartial advice. Fine. Why not go to the Shem Vayeira? Because that's what friends are for. I'm not going for a psak. I'm going to free myself of my own negias, of my own subjective negias, my own personal interests. Therefore, I go to friends. That's what friends are for. Even if I'm certain about something, like the Rashba says, I still have to pursue objective, impartial advice. So if the two of the three highlighted the danger, why listen to Mamre? Says Rabbi Lev, because the first two, it wasn't impartial. They were just doing it from their perspective. They've got their own negias, and therefore they weren't giving impartial advice. That's what I didn't go to you for your own, your own subjectivity. I wanted to know what you would do in my situation where you're freed of my own subjectivity, as it were. And therefore, Mamre was the only one he listened to. And that Taka, you reward him because he gave advice like a friend should give. It was impartial, objective advice.
Why did he not ask about any of the other tests' advice? He just went and did it?
First of all, I don't know if he didn't. Maybe he did. We're not told otherwise. But and it could be that in that situation that the direction was absolutely clear. But I'm not sure. But possibly. But only over here we're told that he actually went to seek advice. But maybe he did. Maybe he did, or maybe in this situation there was a bit of he was a bit swayed. Maybe he wasn't the right thing to do. Something on those lines. Now let's just finish off. The hour is a bit late, so I want to just finish off with one final idea. Gewaltige Kedushas Levi. This I saw in an article by the Ephraim Shapira, and it's a very beautiful insight. My wife had an uncle, maybe you remember him, Joe Reed. Joe Reed was a tremendous person. He was a tremendous asken, a very beloved person, and he did tremendous things for he was involved in Hen Nadas and the JSSM and lots of different organizations. And we have a phrase in the family, the Joe Reed effect. What does that mean? That he could talk to anybody about anything because he would enter your world. He just knew a lot about everything. And if you wanted to talk politics, he would talk politics. He'd talk cars, business, Torah, anything. And the people who, they can enter your world and engage you in areas of interest for you. Now, why is that relevant? Because the Pasuk says in this week's Edra, Vayeira elav Hashem be'elonei mamre v'yoshev pesach ha'ohel k'chom hayom. We've just been discussing it. Vayiso einov, and there are three visitors come. Ve'laboka rotz Avram, vayikach ben boka rach v'toiv, etc. Vayikachem v'chelev, vayitzin lifnehem, v'hu omeid aleihem. And Avram Avinu is standing over his guests. What do these words teach us? V'hu omeid aleihem. Says the Kedushas Halevi, an amazing insight. Haklalhu, the rule is, k'mavur shebal habayis, Lo yemisnag b'fnei hareach yoysim migdulas hareach. A person, the balabais, how do you make your guests feel comfortable? Everyone has their own strategies. What we've learned over the years is sometimes not to stand on sort of. If the guests offer to help, take the help. Sometimes they feel more relaxed if they're sitting in the kitchen, helping out, and they're laying the table, or they're washing up, or they're putting the leftover salads into plastic containers or whatever. That actually they feel more comfortable. You shouldn't behave in a way yoysim migdulas hareach. Kadei she'hareach lo yikanes balabais. What does that mean? V'nei tzadik nikra mahalech. A tzadik is called a mahalech. That means a human being is called a mahalech. As opposed to malachim who are omdim, they're static. Human beings, tzadikim in particular, are mahalchim because they progress. They go from one level to the next. Sheholech tomid madrega l'maylo l'maylo. They're always moving. Malach nikra omeid. The malach, however, is called an omeid. That's why we stand with our feet together. We don't bend our knees because malachim don't have knees. They're omdim. They're static. V'kan rotz Avram shelo yikanu b'hamalachim. So that Avram Avinu wanted to make his guests feel comfortable. So he didn't sort of show off that he was superior to them, that he was a mahalach as opposed to them who are omdim. Hislabish atzma bebechinas malach lios omeid. He therefore sort of put himself in their shoes. He portrayed himself as an omeid and not as a mahalech. And therefore the Pasuk says, V'zehu v'hu omeid aleihem. He took on the guise of an omeid. He was like one of them. A person, to become an omeid means that you make your guests feel so comfortable that you don't make them feel inferior in any way. You make them feel comfortable that they are omdim. They shouldn't feel jealous of Avram. He's a mahalech. He made himself as an omeid whilst they were there. I'll tell you a story that Rabbi Shapira says, which I think brings the point out. The Vizhnitzer Rebbe, Yisrael Hager, had one of his chassidim was making a chasna, and the chassid calls him up a few days before the chasna for a bracha, and he gives him very warm brachas, a very warm person, and he gives him very warm and plentiful brachas. The night of the chasna, It's a Chassidish wedding, so it's a very late chasna with the mitzvah tans. The sadness is that this fellow, his wife had passed away, and he was alone. He'd raised a young family, and he was making a chasna. He comes home from the chasna, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. When he gets home, he hasn't been home for very long. Suddenly there's a knock on the door. And to his amazement and to his delight, he sees the Vizhnitzer Rebbe standing there with his gabba. He invites him in, and he sits there for close to an hour. The Vizhnitzer Rebbe is sitting there, they're having drink, and they're sitting there. He said, so tell me, how was the chasna? And they went through, they were debriefing after the chasna. How was it? Who was there? Who spoke? What was the food like? What did the kids wear? Anyway, close to an hour. Anyway, he wished him mazel tov again, and then he left. The Gabba was just incredulous. He said, can you please tell me why we're talking about children's shoes and chicken at 3, 4 in the morning? What was all that about? So the Vizhnitzer Rebbe said, this person is making a chasna, and it's very difficult for him. When you come back from the chasna, one of the the exciting part is you come back and you're buzzing, you're on a high. You debrief about the chasna, you talk about it, you go through the whole event, you relive it. And for this person, it would have been very painful for him to come back and he has no one to talk to. So I came to be that person to talk to him. He was happy to talk about chicken and children's shoes. He made himself an omeid, as it were, but the mahalach became an omeid. That's the point. And it's actually a very powerful lesson. That's what the Kodesh Salevi says, that Malachi didn't want his guests to feel inferior. He saw that they were Malachim, and therefore they had the capacity of Omed only. They weren't Mahalchim. So to make them feel comfortable, he guised himself as an Omed, and that's what it means in the Pasuk, V'hu Omed Aleihem Tachas Eitz.